giants weren't on my radar when this started. I was chasing something far more mundane, architectural oddities. Doorways built too high, staircases with steps too deep, furniture that seemed calibrated for someone considerably larger than any person I'd ever met. Standard historical curiosities, easy to rationalize as decorative ambition or ceremonial excess. Did I catalogue them, moved on, until the photographs stopped me cold. Not paintings, not folk illustrations passed through generations of artistic exaggeration, photographs. Hard photographic evidence from the mid to late 1800s showing human beings of genuinely impossible scale standing beside ordinary people. The size differential was so extreme they looked fabricated, except they weren't. The grain was consistent, the lighting held up, shadows behaved exactly as physics demands. These images existed decades before photographic manipulation became technically feasible. That's when every comfortable explanation I'd been relying on started quietly falling apart. That the further I'd pushed, the more images surfaced. Cards to visit from the 1860s, cabinet cards from the 1870s, tin-type portraits featuring men and sometimes women standing 8, occasionally 10 feet tall. Not circus performers, not traveling showmen with documented names and advertised routes. Ordinary people. Individuals captured in formal studio settings wearing entirely period-appropriate clothing, frequently surrounded by family members of completely normal height. Did the British Museum archives hold several? The Smithsonian references them briefly, then categorizes them as medical anomalies and closes the file. Did French collections have catalogued similar images? Without further inquiry. Russian imperial documentation mentions individuals of exceptional stature serving in ceremonial capacities. The pattern never changes. Acknowledge, label, file away. Investigate. Never. And the questions that pattern generates are genuinely disturbing. Why were there so many? Why do these photographs concentrate in specific decades almost exclusively between 1850 and 1900, then vanish entirely? Why do period accounts describe these individuals not as spectacles or medical curiosities, but as functioning members of society, holding real authority, working as guards, overseers, construction foremen? Why does the documentation treat their presence as unremarkable? Here's where it becomes genuinely difficult to dismiss. A significant number of these photographs show a specific compositional detail. The giants are standing in front of buildings, and not just any buildings. Massive structures featuring doorways that appear grotesquely oversized for standard humans, but sit in perfect ergonomic proportion to the individuals photographed beneath them. Buildings historians have always explained away as designed for grandeur or psychological intimidation. Buildings that suddenly require no explanation whatsoever the moment you place a 9-foot human being inside the frame. Once that registers, you cannot unregister it. I began systematically measuring doorways in government buildings constructed during the 1700s and 1800s. 12 to 15-foot clearances, not at grand public entrances where spectacle might justify the scale, in working corridors, administrative hallways where nobody performs for anybody, staircases with individual risers so tall that an average person must consciously exert themselves to climb comfortably. Did furniture recovered from estate sales and museum storage, desks, chairs, beds, all running slightly large, all explained away as decorative commissions or accommodations for unusually tall individuals. A reasonable explanation for one building, a reasonable explanation for 10 buildings, deeply unreasonable as an explanation for thousands, because that's the actual count. Courthouses across America, administrative complexes throughout Europe, government infrastructure across Russia, India, South America, all constructed within the same historical window, all featuring identical oversized proportions, all attributed to aesthetic philosophy, Despite the obvious functional impracticality, despite the dramatically increased construction costs, despite the complete absence of logical reasoning for why you would build this way, unless the people occupying these structures simply weren't average-sized. The geographic precision makes this harder to dismiss, not easier. Administrative buildings in St. Petersburg dating to the 1700s have 12-foot doorways in back service corridors. Municipal structures in Buenos Aires feature staircases requiring strides, no standard human takes naturally. Colonial-era government buildings in Delhi, supposedly designed by and for British administrators, contain furniture that would make a 6-foot man feel physically juvenile. None of these were ceremonial spaces built to awe visitors. These were operational buildings, offices, administrative centers, the working infrastructure of governance and institutional authority. So who were they actually built for? That question is where Tartaria becomes genuinely impossible to set aside. If you haven't encountered it, Tartaria appears on maps throughout the 1700s and into the early 1800s as an enormous territory occupying northern Asia. Not a legend, not a mythologized region of uncertain boundaries, an actual labeled political entity appearing in encyclopedias, atlases, and official historical records with the same casual cartographic certainty as France or Spain. Then somewhere in the mid-1800s, it ceases to exist, not through conquest, with documented campaigns and treaties, not through renaming with traceable administrative transitions. Through erasure. The maps are redrawn, the encyclopedias quietly omit it. History proceeds as though it was never there. Except the architecture didn't disappear with it. Massive stone structures scattered across Central Asia, Russia, and Mongolia. Buildings of extraordinary scale and engineering precision. Doorways dimensioned for giants, halls of vast proportions, with no surviving construction documentation, no verified architectural records, no credible explanation for how the engineering was achieved with the technology officially attributed to those periods. What if the giants weren't anomalies at all? What if they were functional? Administrators, overseers, a guardian class embedded in a civilization that subsequent history has been very deliberately taught to forget. What if Tartaria, whatever it genuinely represented, employed these individuals not as spectacles, but as infrastructure, and the architecture simply reflects the population it was designed to serve? It would explain the photographs, why they're consistently formal and official rather than sensational, why they show these individuals in positions of institutional authority rather than as curiosities on display, why the documentation stops in the 1890s, synchronized almost precisely with Tartaria's final disappearance from official cartographic record. Why the buildings persist, while the people who occupied them have been methodically written out of every accessible historical account. Which raises a straightforward question with uncomfortable implications. If the goal was erasing a civilization from collective memory, where would you logically begin? With the most visibly undeniable evidence. The individuals whose physical existence makes the standard narrative structurally impossible. But the photographs weren't the only record being generated. Throughout the 1800s and into the early 1900s, mainstream American newspapers regularly ran stories about the discovery of giant human skeletal remains. Not scattered isolated reports. A consistent, sustained pattern of findings. The New York Times in 1885 reporting a 7-foot skeleton recovered from a Michigan mound. The San Diego Union in 1895 documenting bones of extraordinary dimensions uncovered during railroad construction. The Middletown Signal in 1899 describing giant human remains found in Ohio. These weren't fringe publications running sensational filler. These were establishment newspapers treating these discoveries as straightforwardly newsworthy without apparent controversy or skepticism. The skeletal descriptions are consistent across reports, measurements ranging from 7 to 12 feet. organized burial sites suggesting deliberate interment, accompanying artifacts indicating sophisticated metallurgy and advanced construction knowledge. Then, somewhere around 1920, the reporting stops. Not a gradual decline in frequency, a hard stop. Discoveries that had been generating front-page coverage simply ceased appearing in print entirely. The specimens already recovered, many of them formally transferred to the Smithsonian Institution for further scientific study, have disappeared. The Smithsonian's current position is that no such skeletal material exists within their collections. It lost, misplaced during routine institutional transfers, hundreds of catalogued specimens gone without adequate documentation to explain a single disappearance, let alone a systematic one. The temporal alignment is precise enough to demand explanation. Discoveries peak through the late 1800s. The giant photographs belong to the same decades. Tartaria exits the cartographic record during the same period. Then everything terminates simultaneously. The photographs stop. The newspaper reports stop. The maps are revised, the encyclopedias are updated, as though a collective institutional decision was made that certain categories of question were no longer appropriate to pursue. Why would documented human biological diversity require systematic burial? Why would physical evidence challenging the established narrative of human history need to be made to disappear, unless the implications of that evidence pointed towards something with much larger consequences, something organized, something that suggested the architecture of recent civilization looked fundamentally different from what we've been given. Consider a possibility that sounds deliberately absurd right up until you examine what's actually there. What if the giants weren't a ruling class? What if their scale was purely functional? Administrators of infrastructure, overseers of construction, individuals whose physical dimensions made them genuinely suited to managing projects at scales we now consider barely achievable with modern equipment. What if buildings were proportioned to their occupants, simply because their occupants were the ones overseeing construction and ongoing maintenance? It resolves the architectural questions immediately. Why government buildings, courthouses, administrative centers, structures specifically associated with oversight and institutional control, carry oversized proportions, while domestic residential architecture remains standard human scale? Why the photographs consistently place these individuals in formal institutional contexts rather than domestic ones? Why historical records document them in supervisory authority roles, but almost never as merchants, craftsmen, or ordinary laborers? It also addresses the construction mystery directly. How were massive stone structures achieved with such engineering precision during the 1700s and 1800s? Perhaps the civilizations we credit with building them didn't build them. Perhaps they inherited them from a preceding society that employed individuals physically capable of operating at those scales. And what do you do when you inherit infrastructure you didn't construct and technology you don't fully understand? You absorb the narrative. You claim the legacy. You revise the construction dates, retrofit the architectural credits, and systematically remove the evidence that someone with a fundamentally different physical profile was here before you. Consider how many engineering mysteries evaporate if you assume the builders were substantially larger and proportionally stronger than modern humans. Consider how many feats currently classified as impossible or unexplained become merely difficult when your workforce stands 9 feet tall. What the evidence describes isn't random genetic variation producing occasional anomalies. It describes something structural, a specialized class, a different arrangement, a different civilization. What unsettles me most persistently isn't the evidence itself, it's the institutional silence surrounding it. Academic establishments don't engage with the skeletal record. They process its non-existence. Museums don't display the photographs. They archive them under classifications designed to prevent discovery. Historical institutions don't examine the architectural proportions. They accept the aesthetic explanation without pressure testing whether that explanation actually explains anything. This pattern reproduces across disciplines, across national contexts, across centuries of accumulated scholarship. And it's not characterized by active aggressive suppression. It operates through passive omission. Questions that simply don't get asked, evidence that doesn't get examined, connections that don't get drawn because drawing them produces conclusions that the established framework cannot accommodate. And when you surface it, when you lay the components alongside each other, the photographs, the architectural measurements, the newspaper documentation, the missing institutional records, you receive a consistent response. Interesting, but not significant. As if coincidence possesses unlimited explanatory power, as if patterns carry no evidentiary weight, as if asking why is somehow a methodological failure rather than the foundation of every legitimate inquiry. But the why is precisely the point. Why did humans of extraordinary physical scale exist in sufficient numbers to generate a sustained photographic record and a consistent pattern of burial site discoveries? Why were they documented then systematically forgotten? Why does architecture from a defined historical period accommodate their proportions with ergonomic specificity? Why do these elements cluster geographically and temporally with Tartaria's disappearance from official cartography? And why, when these questions surface in institutional academic contexts, does the conversation terminate immediately? I keep returning to the photographs. These weren't mythological figures. They weren't monsters from inherited folklore. They were people. Individuals with faces and period clothing and apparent family relationships. People who sat for formal portraits with the same unremarkable ordinariness as anyone else in the Victorian era. People whose existence was so functionally normal to contemporary observers that photographers felt no need to explain or contextualize what they were documenting. We made them impossible by deciding they couldn't exist. We transformed documented reality into forbidden speculation. And in doing that, we didn't just lose knowledge of who they were, we lost comprehension of what we actually are, what we've genuinely forgotten, what we've been living inside of, without understanding its origins. The doorways are still there, the staircases haven't been rebuilt to human scale, the buildings that make no ergonomic sense for standard human proportions continue functioning in modern contexts with their original dimensions intact. We move through them every day without registering the question they're physically encoding. We accept institutional explanations without examining whether those explanations survive contact with the actual measurements. Because genuinely examining them requires accepting that history doesn't move in a clean progressive line, that we might be occupying the remnants of something considerably more sophisticated than what we've been given credit for inheriting, something we didn't build, something we don't fully understand, something that encoded in its very physical dimensions the reality of a different kind of human being living inside a different kind of world. Did the buildings hold the memory even when the institutions don't? The photographs preserve what the encyclopedias chose to delete. The evidence remains intact and patient, waiting for someone willing to ask the questions that everyone with institutional standing has quietly agreed not to ask. Who were the giants? Why did they stop appearing? And what else was deliberately erased alongside them that we're still collectively pretending was never present at all?